Welcome back to Mindful Endeavor. I am your host, New Age Alchemist. So joining us today, we have back again for the third time, I believe, JCJ Street, Josh Jacobs. The guy that started this podcast. Is the first episode, and I think the 10th. Uh, did not plan that out. It just kind of happened that way. But yeah, it's always good to have you back. And really quick before we continue, I gotta give the disclaimer that we're not mental health professionals, and if we do talk about any topic related to mental health, we were talking about it just from an outside perspective looking in, or based on stuff we've experienced or seen people experience. We're not giving medical advice. And it's important to keep in mind that if you do need help, go ahead and seek it. We definitely encourage that and encourage the conversations around mental health to continue. All right. So really quick, introduce yourself again for those that haven't, seen you on the
Don't know
podcast
who I
yet.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again. Always love doing this type of stuff. But I'm Joshua Jacobs, aka at JCJ Streets, and just back here on the podcast. Gonna get into some cool stuff, talk about some different topics, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I should say that for those that are watching this through a visual medium, my camera is not working. I'm actually in the process of upgrading equipment. I'm very proud of that, and I'm still working through some stuff because I thought the camera was going to be working, but now I have to fix the camera. But at least we got the mic, we got the PC, and it's getting better. So without further ado, let's continue. So yeah, you did something that I was very, very jealous of. You went hiking over what I call winter break, during the Christmas time. I saw a bunch of your pictures on Instagram, and that was pretty awesome. You got to see some deer. How was that? Where did you hike and all that stuff?
Yeah, so took a little bit of time during, you call it the winter break, but it's actually, at least in my field, it's the busiest time of year. But had one, or I think I had a few days off that I decided to go to the Grand Canyon. And really, within my family, at least my experience, the only time that we go there is actually to hike the Grand Canyon. It's not just to sightsee and, ooh, ah, but it's kind of a family tradition. Me and my extended family decided to do this one. So, it was a great time. So I can get into as much detail, but it was just phenomenal. I mean, in the winter time, it's such a different experience than within the summer, because obviously the temperature, but then just all the landscape is just completely different. I think everything's just more crisp. In the summer, I think it's hot and muggy, and you not really want to be outside. But it was just snow-capped. We call it mountains, but they're actually cliffs. But it was awesome to look at.
Nice, yeah. So I did have a hiker on this podcast before, and around the time that I ran into her Instagram account, she was mostly hiking during the wintertime. And that's something that I don't never really pictured that, because I grew up in California, and most of California doesn't really have, Southern California at least, doesn't necessarily have snow during the wintertime, generally speaking, most of the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just used to like hiking off cliffs and different little trails and things like that. And then to see like how much snow, and it's like, dude, like it looks different. It's like, it literally is night and day, like, from wintertime versus summer.
Oh yeah. And I think the biggest, if you're not from the desert, in California is a different kind of desert, but at certain altitudes. So I flew into Flagstaff, and there was just tons of snow from Flagstaff all the way to the Grand Canyon. And most people, they think like, oh yeah, you got sand, you got a bunch of red rocks, but that's about it. But once you put some snow on top of that, and these great looking trees, it is just a majestic landscape. It's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that it snows in Arizona. Even like mostly because the elevation, I think it's like what 10,000 feet of elevation in Flagstaff or something like that, and a lot of people don't realize how much it snows and that there's seasons. A lot of people think of Arizona as Phoenix, and they think that's mostly Arizona, Phoenix, and Tucson, which is not the case.
Yeah. Tons of other places to visit. There's Sedona, Flagstaff. I'm really fond of that area. And the wild thing is, from Flagstaff to Sedona. I'm not sure exactly what the elevation difference is, but it's only 30 minutes away. But you go from like alpine, a bunch of trees and crisp mountain air to Sedona, which is beautiful in itself with these red rocks and desert landscapes. And I'm sure you can think of several movies that it is straight out of, but it changes very quickly. But it is just when you go through it, you get a lot of different types of environments and biomes and stuff like that.
Dude, like Flagstaff is definitely, well, I mean, it kind of still is one of the top places that I want to live. Obviously, I ended up choosing Texas, but Flagstaff is definitely was up there. I miss terrain. I honestly do miss terrain, and just hiking in general. Like, it seems like an exercise, but I mean, we all know that exercise is good for the soul, for mental clarity, and obviously for your physical health as well. And I think it's different. Like hiking is definitely different than just like, oh, I'm gonna walk a trail that's mostly cement, and there's some trees and here and there. Whereas you have like if you go hiking in like say the Grand Canyon where there's a lot of landscape and you really get a little bit closer to nature, it's a different kind of like mental clarity that you get and different kind of like experience overall.
Correct, and I would completely agree with you. So in California, we have tons of mountains, especially in Southern California. We have, I guess, when you're living in the valley, you can go many different places. But I think a lot of the trails, first over trafficked. You have a lot of people that don't take the best care of it. That may be a California thing. I don't know, but you see graffiti, you see trash on the trails, and it's just like, okay, you can't really get your mind out of the city vibe when you have all that stuff there. Now, going to places that have so much landscape and different, remote places like that, it's a completely different area where you can free your mind up from. That's how I get away from work. That's one of the advantages that I see from getting outside. The fresh air, obviously the physical aspect of getting exercise and sunlight as well, because the only light that I get during the week is from my computer screen. So, it's just all around, and it's free for the most part. You don't have to invest in a lot of, you don't have to, you're not being charged to go on a trail, so that's always nice.
Yeah.
You can go as far as your talents or ability takes you, and you can just do whatever.
Yeah, that's the awesome thing about the outdoors. You can really like it's one of those things that you put in what you want to get out of it. Like, and it's really like, I mean, Mother Nature, as we all know, it's a real mother effer. But it's still the outdoors itself, like it can be very forgiving, it can be very, very merciful, and it can provide a lot, again, as long as you respect it and you put in what you want to get out of it. It's one of those things where what you see is what you get, but at the same time, you can see how much of it you want to make yourself see, basically. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's your experience, it's up to you. You're not following a group. I mean, you might be able to follow like somebody like blogs recommendations for a certain trail, a certain type of hike, sure. But even then, like if you're following a blueprint, like it's still going to be your experience. It's not going to be the person that gave you that blueprint. That's the amazing thing about the outdoors that I cannot like stress enough, like how awesome that is.
Yeah, and something that I like to do on very popular trails, I like to go off the trail a lot. And I actually have a funny story back when I was living in California, and now I'm in Texas. But when I was in California, there is a trail in Lake Forest, and really beautiful trail. They have these red rocks and all that stuff. And one of the trails, when it goes up there, they had these signs that says like, "Hey, keep on the trail. Do not go off the trail." And I took that as a challenge. So I was like, you know what? Like this is more of a suggestion rather than an outright rule. So I decided to do some rock climbing, not anything like too technical or anything like that, but I wanted to, test my limits and all that stuff. So I got on top of this rock and I was taking pictures, and then and then I look over and I see this park ranger, I guess you would say. He's just looking directly at me, just coming up the trail, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm busted." So, as I was coming down, like, I mean, I could just see him. He's just like taking out his book. He's just like ready to write me a fat ticket. So get down there. I'm trying to talk my way out of it. I was like, "Oh, I didn't even see the sun," which was like right there in front of the spot that it came down from, and there was no talking out of that. So, make sure that if you're going out, you respect the rules. I learned my lesson that day, and I thought I was kind of above the rules because I usually take care of the trail. I don't litter and graffiti and all that stuff, and I understand why they gave me the ticket, so I'm not upset about that. But I just got caught on that day, so I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that similar story, but basically, I think what was the one trail off of Palos Verdes. It's basically off a cliff. It's not really a trail. It's just you're literally just going down the cliff and then going back up. And if you go like from one starting point, I forgot what the area is called, but you go from that point. If you cannot rock climb, then you have to go all the way down and around and go to like the nice little up a little hill to be able to walk on something. But and they kind of recommend that. But me and the person that I was hiking with, the one that introduced me to that trail, we both decided, you know what, screw this, let's just go back the other way. Like, and they don't necessarily guarantee your safety because obviously, you're basically free climbing that thing, and it's not like I wouldn't say it's more than like 15 feet, maybe, probably a little bit less than that.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't even know, to be honest, but it wasn't like it was like a 50-foot climb or anything like that. But you still had to rock climb it, and that was the first time that I ever rock climbed anything, whether harnessed or not. And this girl was like, she's like tiny, she's like 5'1", like really thin, and I'm like, dude, like I'm not a light dude. She tells me to go first. I'm like, why? Like, it's like she goes, well, it's that way. If you fall, I can
It's just
help
like,
you.
hey, if you go down there, you're gonna break your neck first, and then I'll just I'll bounce home.
Well, she was like, I can help you. I'm like, how the heck? If I come rolling down like an avalanche on you, I doubt you're gonna help me. Like, I was just thinking, like, crap. Like, it's more of an incentive now, not because I already thought, all right, I can't make myself look like an idiot because she's cool, and I was like, I'm gonna try my best not to look like dumb, but not have to try double as hard because if I fall, I could potentially fall on her, and that's not cool. But it turns out she told me to go first because she knew it was going to be awkward for me. So she took all these pictures and all this video, and I'm like, fudge. Like, yeah, like, but anyway, that was the end of the hike. But as we were going down, like we saw a seal actually wash up like onto the shore, and that was pretty cool. Like being able to see that up close, and then we saw some whales like just kind of splashing around like in the water. And the whales themselves are not are like an everyday thing. They always like pop up around that time, but the seal did not. And that was the first time that my friend had seen one. So it's like it's one of those things where even though she's been hiking that trail or going down that trail multiple times, like that was the first time I ever seen a seal. So we thought that was pretty cool. It's again, even though it's the same thing over and over again, you can see other aspects of nature that just pop up inside. Like, hey, I want to make an appearance this time.
That is pretty cool, especially in California. It's hard to get away into nature. I mean, there's tons of areas that you can go to see nature, but um, just in California, there's just the population. You have tons of people that are on different trails, so you really have to get away from it to find something that's a hidden gem. So I understand that.
Yeah, dude. It's really just because a lot of it is suburbs, right? Like you've seen now, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but you've seen like the comparisons between, how Texas is versus like California. California, like a lot more of it is suburb-ish, unless you go out like an hour and a half inland, maybe 2 hours to go into the desert. And even then that's changing because, population and cheaper housing or whatever. But here, like you have I mean, it's also changing here in Texas too. But you have like like you have like one suburb, and then you have like a huge plot of land, like just land, and another suburb, and another plot of land, and it's everything spaced out, so you're able to like see still like some kind of amalgamation of between the like humans and the rest of nature. Because
Hmm.
I mean we are animals to some degree. We have the same type of cell. Like an animal cell is the same as any other animal, but so we should be part of nature, like we should be. But a lot of times, for whatever reason, either because of bad Disney movies or Disney movies in general, we think that nature is a certain way and it's not, and then we often end up disrespecting it, sometimes unwillingly and sometimes without even knowing.
Yeah, and that's a huge factor. I actually wanted to kind of touch on that. Um, if we get into some details with the Grand Canyon, but yeah, nature is a lot of people underestimate it, especially if you don't have experience being in the outdoors and all that stuff. It's a sobering experience being out in nature for, and being away from all of the niceties that we have with civilization. Heating water or available water in a water bottle, things like that. So, and it gets very dangerous. I think that a lot of people underestimate their abilities and also are underprepared for the elements. So, uh, again, being from California, 80 degrees all year, it's just like, hey, uh, that was one of the biggest transitions coming out here to Texas. I'm going outside, and right now it's in January, and sometimes it's 40, 30 degrees outside, and I'm in a t-shirt and shorts, and I was like, okay, I can't be out here for too long. So,
Yeah, like this past year, actually during the summer, dude, there was actually a hailstorm over here in the area where I'm at. Like in the summer, a hailstorm. Like it's like what? Like really? Like yeah, in the middle of August, there was a hailstorm just randomly on a Sunday afternoon. It lasted for about like 20 minutes. It wasn't like really big hail, but it was enough to necessarily to warrant shelter.
uh-huh.
But I was just like, wow, like in the summer, like there's hail? What the heck?
Hmm.
That doesn't make sense. And that's a lot of times, even like if we're not outside a lot, we don't necessarily we underestimate like how much power there is in nature and how much power there is in the weather and the climate and everything. Um, and to that degree, sometimes too, I think sometimes we know it also lends itself to overestimating something. Like overestimating your abilities. Sometimes you think, oh, I can cook for myself or whatever, and that means I'll be outside. Like if I'm outdoors, I can easily start a fire. But you don't realize that, oh well, to start a fire, you need like wood that's dry, not necessarily any random stick will catch fire because of the moisture content and all that stuff. And those are things that if you don't have the experience with it, you won't ever think about it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just interesting. There's a lot of tactics, and I guess we call them survivalist guides or anything. But just I want to be more knowledgeable being out on a trail like that. I haven't done a lot of heavy treks into the wilderness or anything like that, but I think it's just valuable to have that knowledge if I were ever to get hurt or lost or something like that to be able to survive to a certain extent. But I just know how ill-equipped I am when I go outside, and for some of these hikes, like if the weather turned for the worst, I could be caught out there, and you have overexposure or lack of nutrition or water and things like that. Those are very apparent concerns, and they get there very quickly, and that's something that with recent experience, not for myself but for someone else that I observed, and it became to where it was like they were they're in the danger zone as far as getting severely hurt or even dying. So it's like it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the best way to really be humble is to go outside in nature, not necessarily a trail, but I mean, even in a trail, if you're there long enough, like you can feel vulnerable. Um, and but it's just like, for example, like if you like it takes like a diabetic that needs insulin. Well, first of all, we're going to store the insulin. The insulin needs to be cold, right? So unless you're out in the wilderness during the winter season, if you're stuck somewhere, let's just say you go by yourself, you hurt yourself,
Yeah.
you're stuck somewhere, and you end up spending the night, assuming that some kind of animal doesn't get you. For somebody like, for example, that has some kind of like issue that needs medication, and you realize, well, I don't have access to that out in the outdoors, so I'm very vulnerable. And when we get stuck in these concrete jungles, we think, oh, well, we have a fridge, we have heating, we have cooling, we have electricity. I mean, you and I were both born in times where we already had that, so we took it's easy for people in our generation to take it for granted when we don't have it. And
Mhm.
I mean, if it comes to a point where we don't have it, then it's like, oh, well, I took it for granted.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if you've experienced any shortages in your grocery store lately. Have you experienced that?
Not recently. I know
Not
that.
recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, because well, when COVID hit, obviously that put some strain on the um, as far as the supply lines. But then just recently, and this is more of a religious thing. So as far as every year, there's kind of a religious thing where it's called the Daniel fast, and it's just 3 weeks of like a special diet for Christians or I think maybe some other religions observe it, but with the Daniel fast, there's like vegetables, fruits, things like that, and our local HEB is actually cleared out. And I was actually looking through Twitter recently, and they had a lot of other grocery stores that were cleared out of a lot of staples as far as veggies, fruits, and things. Uh, you know, as far as the processed stuff was still there, but then all of these, quote unquote, fresh foods were taken off the shelf. So um, seeing those type of things, like you're 100% right. I've never seen that in my lifetime where there was a scarcity of anything. Everything was on the shelves and readily available. And then when I saw that, it was kind of and for me, I think it was shocking first, and then also it shows an underlying problem with how fragile our, just our whole economy and just how all that works, and just it was, yeah, it was concerning for me.
Yeah, I mean, like in the beginning when COVID hit, I think I did. I mean, even here in here in Texas, my family in California was a different story. In California, I think you were still in California when COVID happened. Like in California, I saw the pictures of like the shortages. Where like a buddy of mine showed me the picture of a Costco there, and it was like, yeah, this is basically after they stocked, and it was just like one piece of meat like every 6 feet of the fridge or whatever, or every like 3 feet. So it's like, wait, what is like that? Looks like out of like a movie. Like, really? Like that's what you're going through? Like, yeah. Meanwhile, here in Texas during that time, it wasn't as bad. I mean, there was still stuff in certain grocery stores. Yeah, there was stuff missing, but I mean, stuff out of supply. But for the most part, we didn't see that. And like you said, I'm starting to hear about it on Twitter and other social media outlets that there's shortages in lots of places. Even when I went to California, when I went to Carl's Jr., there was a sign that says, "Due to a national shortage, certain items are off the menu." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And yeah, like
You better have my milkshake.
luckily they had my superstar, dude. That's what I ordered all the time. They had my superstar, and I was good. But yeah, I was just like, "Wait, what?" And then it's
Sir,
like,
we've run out of all beef, so it's like, wait, what?
yeah.
What do I
So
order? Well, we have fries and chicken tenders. That's about it.
we have a grilled cheese, and like, what? But it's like it ties back into nature and how we don't know where sometimes things come from, right? Like a lot of people don't know where food comes from. They think that just pops up in grocery stores, like, and you know, yeah. We are not as invincible as we like to think, even though sometimes we don't think about it.
Yeah, and we've talked about that in a previous podcast, and just being aware of what you're eating and all that stuff. And one in particular uh, topic that kind of replays in my head, and this is a specific chemical that's in most of these processed foods, but it also has started to leach into other areas. Even like certain meats and all that stuff. Is things like canola oil. Wow, that was a mouthful. And rapeseed oil.
Yeah.
And one thing that when I learned that it was just toxic sludge that they can put in a bottle and people cook with it, I was shocked. Like when I learned that, I was just like, okay, this is 100%. I'm staying away from all processed foods, and that's even things that are cooked, in a restaurant. You go to. I'm not trying to target Chili's, but I don't know what they're cooking with. I'm sure it's not coconut oil. It's just canola oil. They have rapeseed oil. They have things that are unnatural oils, vegetable oil, things like that. And when I found out this is not naturally occurring and what it's made out of, and it's just literally toxic sludge that's just, they take it as a byproduct and then they bottle it up so they can. I was just okay. I really have to be conscious about what I eat, and I feel like this topic is kind of turning on its head. But
I think it's all
that's been
related.
something. Yeah, that's been something that I've really been conscious about. Is just where's my food coming from? How's it made? And when you learn about that, it's just it changes your mind about a lot of things. But
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't even say it's going on its head. I mean, I think it's coming back full circle because it all comes down to nature, and that we're still part of nature, even though we built these concrete structures that we've taken shelter in. But at the end of the day, we're still part of nature. It has to come from somewhere, and it doesn't just like, even though we look at certain foods as synthetic, they don't necessarily just come out of nowhere in a lab. Like they originated from nature, just through the processing and the different alchemy of the different kinds of alchemies between or not alchemies, alchemy between different combinations of food and different what we do to them and how we treat them. And because even synthetic chemicals to some degree come from the earth. They're just you know we have the level of consciousness to be able to process them down to what they are today, like the grapeseed oil, like that is from nature to a certain degree. But that kind of begs the question: were we meant to have this much knowledge to be able to do this into our food supply or not? Because like when you look at the nature, you think I'm gonna go hunt a rabbit, put it over a fire, eat it, use the skin to make some kind of little bracelet or whatever, and boom, that's like the most primal thing. But you look at like certain things that made food either taste better, like different kinds of spices and things like that, and in the way we use them, it's a little unnatural, but it's still like you're still getting health benefits from using different spices grounded up and different methods of cooking and things like that.
yeah, and again, that's a skill that I need to learn is using those spices in order to make my food taste better. Yeah, and but it comes at a cost. Civilization comes at a cost, and that cost is that we're filling ourselves with fake food, and more often than not, it is just high in calories, low in nutritional value, and I kind of think of it as like Velveeta cheese. I don't want to step on any toes here, but I hate Velveeta cheese. I think it just looks like plastic, it smells like plastic, and but I think that's a good analogy to a lot of the food that we have. Cereals, you have processed stuff, even like some of this meat that we eat is like hot dogs, and it's just a minced up byproduct of different parts of different animals, and then all the microplastics that are in it, and it's hard to find food that actually sounds appealing after you learn all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think I mean, because me, like I like to watch a lot of cooking shows, a lot of cooking documentaries, cooking history, and you look at like how, I mean, how we, because I mean, processing is a form of cooking, like how corporations do it, like, but when you look at like certain techniques of cooking we have in the U.S. compared to other countries, we're starting to see how okay, maybe this country had it right the entire time. Like when you look at like for example in Argentina, like I don't know if this is a joke or if it's actually like a motto that they go by, but basically they're saying like if the fire touches any kind of meat while you're cooking, you're a bad cook. Yeah, like
Hmm.
like that. Yeah. So where you look at like the typical American barbecue, get the fire nice and hot, throw the steak on there, and if the fat drips and it combusts with the fire and the fire, it the fire shoots up and it touches the meat, right? And but we're kind of slowly moving away from that too. And I mean, we've had that already in our back pocket, but we just never really like put it all together. Like for example, smoking. We don't cook that directly with fire. We have an offset little chamber with that shoots the smoke into the grill itself, and then that's what cooks the meat, right? And I don't know how we didn't put those two and two together, but we look at different things like that. It's like, so how do they cook back then? Like, they just had an open fire and they just throw a piece of meat. You look at like certain tribes in Australia, they when they hunt, they basically build a little fire pit. They throw the whatever animal they've hunted in there, cover it with coals, and then it basically cooks like a little oven. But still, the fire's not necessarily touching it, so it's like kind of weird.
Yeah, culturally, I think it's interesting. Culturally, how different things are prepared, but they're really the same thing. So like chicken is pretty universal, at least in to my knowledge. But
chicken
how
soup.
we prepare it.
Chicken soup, dude. Yeah, dude.
Chicken
It's the
soup.
same. Well, I mean, every culture has its own flair, but it's chicken soup. Like
Yeah,
the taste is like 80% similar to, like, for example, chicken soup from the US versus chicken soup from like my mom that she makes Mexican chicken soup, which is not that much different, but they're different cultures.
no, it's very interesting when you look at that, and then historically, I'm interested in hearing more about that cooking history. I'm a big history buff, and love hearing about how things were and how people taken things, not necessarily just cooking, but it's very interesting to me learning about how other people, other civilizations have gone through things.
And I think when you're looking at, like, for example, what we were talking about a little bit earlier, uh, when you're looking at all these synthetic things that we're now eating, that we're now heavily dependent on the diet, I think there's now starting to be a shift in, like, all right, let's go more back to our roots. Like, we're slowly going back to our roots and eating more whole foods. I personally don't like even that term whole foods, because or even a superfood. Superfood is the word that really kind of like irks me, really, because I hate how something's called a superfood when it's like, no, it's just food. Like,
Food, it's
it's what
real
we're
food.
supposed to be eating. Yeah, exactly. Real food. It's what
Yeah,
we're supposed to be eating.
and that's my realm for sure. That's marketing, and um, yeah, that's how you sell stuff. That's
Yeah.
how we've gotten to this point where people have gotten into this rhythm of just going along with the status quo. So I do like seeing content that is more geared towards real food. Like you said, they're not superfoods. Like the avocado is like, it's not something that's some aboriginal secret that's been locked away for years. It's like, this is a substance that's bioavailable, and you're able to eat it, but we've just commercialized it and made it into something different. And another quick point is like a lot of the vegetables and mostly fruits, how they've been bioengineered in order to be either more sweet or
Mhm.
look better. So you have strawberries that are supposed to be small and tart are now huge and sweet, and all these different, like, if you look at a real strawberry, or trying to think of another example off the top of my head, but these things are just completely different, and they taste different as well. But the nutritional value is like night and day. It's like zero nutrients in this one, and then the natural source is just, it gives you what your body needs.
Yeah, and I feel like when you said the civilization came at a cost, right? Um, I think when you look at it right now, present day times, especially in more like populated and denser areas, um, a lot of it's like hustle and bustle, like get from point A to point B, because time is very limited. We've seen like LA traffic, like you just want to get home, and when you get home, like sometimes you don't even feel like cooking or anything like that, because it's like, dude, I've spent an hour and a half to go 12 miles on the freeway, and I just want to put that behind me, decompress before I do it all over again the next day. And when you look at like foods, like I think because of that, that's when you look at the evolution of the foods from like the 50s all the way until now. You look at like TV dinners, like, oh, you don't have to worry about slaving away in the kitchen. Here's a TV dinner. Everything's all made for you. So it's like, so it made
Yeah.
it easier for us to like not worry so much about nutritional value and just worry about like sustenance, really. And it's like, all right, well, this TV dinner will provide me with the calories, and I take away the burden of having to cook or having to worry about what to eat. Whereas like you look at now, like why is it that we have an issue with overeating? It's because it's really easily available for us. Like you look at cookies, pastries, all this stuff. You can just go to a donut shop, get donuts, and boom, you kill them in like 6 seconds, like a second per donut. I mean, I'm exaggerating, of course, but
No, I can do that. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I can definitely do that.
I may or may have not been speaking from experience, but anyway. So it's but like let's just say you take away that convenience. Like, all right, well now if you want a donut, you have to make it. How many times are you not gonna are you gonna be like, you know what, I want a donut, but I don't feel like putting in all the work for the donut?
I'd be a lot thinner. I'll tell you that. I do not enjoy cooking. I really don't. So I try to keep it in one batch, cook at the beginning of the week. But yeah, I would be a lot thinner, 100%. Even this processed stuff, but even then, like going back to your point of where we have been in the past and how, let's say, two generations before us, really had a lot of food around, but it was more wholesome food or just complete food with nutrients in it. But people were thin back then, and part of the problem why we're so obese now is that we're coupling huge amounts of sugar with tons of calories. So then, it makes it addictive. But also, if you take out the fiber, then it's not making you full. So you can go through, I can go through a box of Cheez-Its in one sitting and not even think twice about it, be hungry in the next hour. And that's just, it's unconscious eating. And that's really where it is. Like going back to that thing called rhythm, where it's just a hypnosis. Like it's just a muscle memory. Like I'm going to grab a box. I'm not even hungry. I'm just going to do it because either I'm nervous, I'm bored, I'm watching TV. And it's just a vicious cycle until you consciously say like, okay, what am I going to eat? How many calories am I taking in? How much of the macronutrients, how many micronutrients am I getting? And it's tough. Who wants to calculate their food like I do? Not very many people. Like, and that's I mean, I literally put my food on a scale, and I have to be like, okay, how much meat do I have? Okay, what are the micronutrients? And then, just trying to get that all fit in one day. It's very difficult, and not a lot of people have that discipline. So, I'm not saying that I'm better or anything like that. It's just that once I knew that this is how many calories I need in order to sustain myself, and then if I want to lose weight, which is my goal, this is what I'm going to have to do.
Yeah, but and also too, I mean, there's different, like we can tie this to mental health because a lot of people may not know that they're depressed, but they overeat when they stress eat, right? And I know I've been in the past and sometimes in the present, even in the present, I stress eat sometimes too, and that's been contributing to a lot of the weight that I gain. And that's actually the main reason why. It's mostly been through stress eating. But because I'll tell you this right now, like most of the time when my head is like in the game and it's in a good place, like sometimes I even forget to eat. Like I'll be honest with you, like just because I don't even think about it, like unless I feel the actual physical feeling of hunger, that's the only time I remember to eat. But but we can attribute that to depression and anxiety, and some people eat because they're anxious, and it's one of those things that like that's why I always say that like physical health, mental health, they go hand in hand. And again, if like let's just take that aspect already out. I mean, because we've already talked about it, but like now you look at convenience. Like the convenience of things makes it so much easier to overconsume. The fact that everything's so readily available, like you could get a bag of Oreo or a little sleeve of Oreos for like $3, and before you even know it, because there's no nutritional value, like you're already down to a whole entire sleeve of Oreos, and that's like easily like anywhere from 500 to 700 calories. So and it goes back to like what I mentioned a little bit earlier. Like if you were to like if you wanted to eat cookies, ice cream, and all that stuff, if you had to make that yourself, there was no other way to just buy it outright or pay somebody to get it. Like you would literally not eat any of that stuff. Like, like you won't. Like it's easier to just cook a steak than it is to make cookies.
Yeah,
And I think that comes down to something that I know I've mentioned multiple times on the podcast with various guests: instant gratification. We want the instant gratification of that sweet thing. But do we want to go through all the work of making a cookie? Not really. It's not all the time, at least. Sometimes even then, like sometimes we think, oh, I made cookies. Well, all you really did was just get that freaking tube and just portioned out the dough and put them on the tray. And, oh, well, that's considered making cookies. Well, not necessarily, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's not completely from scratch. No, I completely understand that because, like I said, don't like to cook, so all that stuff is just like the easiest possible, and that's something that I systematized. I was like, hey, this is what I do. I'm not trying to do this for taste, which I would highly benefit from some tips as far as spicing it up a little bit.
I
But
got you, bro. I got you.
yeah, but I have my staples. Got my chicken, got my beef. All right, those are lunch and dinner, and then I got broccoli and uh, let's say lettuce. Those are my vegetables. So very simple to make in an Instapot, and then I'm completely done. 30 minutes, I have all my meals for the week instead of trying to fit in 40 minutes every night trying to fix something fancy and all that stuff. But that's just what works for me. Um, Wanted to touch on one point that you had with the mental health and so I think there's a fine line between like depression and then just having those habits that are kind of like comforts. So
Yeah.
I'm a stress eater. When I have certain triggers that allow me to or enable me to overeat, and one of them is indulging in alcohol. So when I drink, one thing that my body kind of does is like, hey, get some greasy, fatty food to like offset this, try to sober you up.
Hmm.
Also, when I'm just either stressed from work, school, anything like that, I turn to comfort food because that's just and that was more of a habit as I was growing up. It was more of my outlet instead of going to drugs. It was food. So we all have those habits that we get into until, like I said, until we are conscious of them. That's when we can try to reverse that. And I think maybe with 12 steps, I'm not in AA or anything like that, but you try to replace a habit with something else that's either productive or just something that's similar to what you're doing. Like smokers, they'll chew gum instead of, it's usually just the tactile sense of having something on your lips that really gets people to keep smoking. So if they chew gum instead, they've done studies that actually helps with, going back to smoking. So
Yeah.
that's what I've done in order to help me out with that.
Yeah. I mean, it requires big changes. The issue really is no one's really going to know what mental state you are in better than yourself, right? So, um, but and even then, like the threshold of what is exactly a good mental state changes from person to person. So, like for us, I mean, we're very similar in that sense that we're like, hey, you know what, we got to stop it, we got to change our habits, and it requires a big change. So it's different for us than for somebody else that's truly clinically depressed and food is their only outlet. I mean, because even food to a certain degree, it can be tied to addiction, which, addiction is something that I think, I don't know if there's studies around that or if it was just purely from a from a theoretical standpoint that addiction could be in some form hereditary. So basically genetic. And, if that's the case, then, we already have something else that kind of works against us, if we get the bad luck of the draw. But for the most part, like you said, habits do play, and you bring up a good point between what is exactly depression state of eating versus just kind of a bad habit. There's a fine line.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason I say that is that, and this is completely outside looking in. Um, I don't have huge experience with personal depression or anyone around me, but I think that those type of feelings, like I've felt sad and kind of had weeks where I'm just like unmotivated and things like that. But um, what I've kind of observed is that um, if there is the underlying sense that someone has as far as their alignment with what they're here on this earth to do. And some people say like, oh, I have this crappy job and I'd rather be doing this. I think it goes beyond that, and it's more of living living your purpose. And
Hmm.
that kind of sounds corny and cliche, but to be honest, if you are getting up every day and living out your purpose where you are in full control of that purpose, not just like, hey, I need to survive, but this is what I was here on earth to do. Um, I think there's a misalignment there because a lot of the popular culture surrounding a lot of things that we can call it food, music, TV, social media, all that stuff, it's programming our minds completely different
Yeah.
to what we want to do. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example, like, glorification in pop culture of, you know, um, hookup culture and knocking it or anything like that. It's a lifestyle if you want to do that. But if you are
Yeah.
constantly feeding yourself that type of stuff and that's not who you are, yeah, there's going to be a misalignment, and that's what you're feeding your mind, and that can lead into other, I guess, degenerative habits. You could say with uh, just your lifestyle, what you're putting into your body, with food, your activity level. It could be going down because it's just not motivating you to do those type of things. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, it hampers. I think that's really what contributes to a lot of depression nowadays, and why it's so rampant is that there's a misalignment there. And uh, and one more point I want to have from that is like the great resignation with all this new shift in the workplace, or the workforce, is that a lot of people are um, not just resigning from their positions, but also reevaluating what they really want in their lives, and they want to have more control over that. Sometimes, for me, it was remote work. That was something that has always been top of mind, what I wanted to do. I would also love to travel and experience new things, so that's like the next step. And that's what you build off of. But if there is clashing, one thing's telling you this thing that you just really don't want, but you feel like you're tugged that way, that causes a really a lot of conflict in your mind. And you can call that kind of cognitive dissonance, if you will.
Hmm. No, yeah. So I think that misalignment that you're talking about, I think that, I mean, me personally, I think that's, I don't want to, I don't want to say like you hit the nail on its head, because again, every person is different, but I would definitely say that that does contribute to a lot of the stuff that we see, a lot of anxiety for sure. I think it can be attributed to that, because it's like what you want to portray yourself as versus what you are actually portraying yourself is different, or what do you want, like what you're saying, when with like what your lifestyle is versus what is being fed to you. There's that I definitely that think that those are valid points. But yeah, and not to necessarily segue for the sake of changing the subject, but just because we're running low on time.
Sure.
I think when you're talking about like a purpose, um, I think doing a big change could definitely make the purpose known for someone unexpectedly. Like, I
Mhm.
know recently you made a big move in your life, and I think from what we've been talking about outside of this podcast is that I think that it definitely helped realign certain things for you, and you found more of a purpose for yourself. And I think, I mean, I just from by looking at you, you've never seen happier. I would say, you know, would you agree?
Yeah, I do appreciate that, and I've definitely noticed that I feel more aligned with where I want to go, for sure. And um, a lot of that big change, it was, maybe threefold, I guess you could say, because first moving from California to Texas, and then the next, pretty in close succession. So 2021, moved to Texas. So now I'm owning a home. Um, and then right before that, had my daughter, and then also got married to my wife. So starting a family is a huge deal, and also a hurdle, kind of or milestone, I should say, not a hurdle. Um, and then um, uh, also just that leap of going to a new state, and what are you going to do for work, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I will say that when you have a full out plan and you execute on it, I mean, there you will surprise yourself, because you know you go and you work on stuff, and you may have failed in the past or anything like that. But if you have a drawn out plan and you execute it uh, with all your faith and your effort, it can be done. And uh, I don't want to say like having all that in quick succession was a tough battle for me, but it really just gave myself confidence to be able to take my life to the next level and give myself what I really want, and not just be here to survive and have this just this low energy or low existence, is I would put it. This is just me being critical of myself. I always want to strive for that next level, and I don't want to settle for things that I cannot tolerate, things that will make me unhappy, any toxic people, or you know job, or anything that's forcing me to do things that I don't want to do. I'm not going to accept that.
Yeah, and you've been pretty good at like just being like, okay, it's why am I going to let this bother me or whatever. And you and I have had talks where I have not been a good arbiter of that, basically, where it's like I had a conflict with someone and like I'm still thinking about it 3, 4, or 5 months down the road where I've never even seen that person since that day. So it's like that definitely there's a toll to be paid on your mental health with that, and it's not good. But when you're talking about your situation, moving from state to state, I mean, it's a big change. And you know what? Like, we don't necessarily have a negative connotation of change or the word change, but we know that change is scary, right? Because the unknown, like, well, a lot of it's faith, because it's like, okay, well, I don't have any proof that if I do this, it'll result in this. Like, things, a lot could happen between where I'm at now to where I'm trying to get. A lot can happen that might steer you off to a different direction. Like, and it
Yeah,
may not be good. It may not be. It may be the best thing that's ever happened to you. You never really know. It's pretty risky. I mean, the only thing we can really do is try our best to mitigate that risk and and take calculated risks. I mean, that's something that just because, oh yeah, well, I don't know what's going to happen if I try to achieve this goal, or if I try to do this thing, just because of that doesn't necessarily mean you just leave it all to play out out of your control. Like, there's some factors that you can control and you can mitigate certain risk. And I definitely have encouraged some of my other friends to do that. Do your research whenever you want to move to another state. Like in my case, the research was already done. It's just like when I moved from California to Texas, the research was already done. I already had a feeling where I wanted to be and this and that. But it's like, okay, I there's something that needs to happen before I just say yes. And before I knew it, I got a job, out here in Texas, and I was like, all right, let's go. Not even thinking twice. I'm like, all right, I got everything laid out to how I want to go and everything. And even though I still had like, backup plans and things like that, and some safety nets,
mm,
a lot of unknowns happened from when, I decided to move to Texas to when I actually was in Texas. So it's not for the only thing certain is the change itself, but you don't know what the outcome is going to be.
exactly. And for some of your listeners, hopefully, one of these might stick for them if they're trying to go for or trying to attain like a big change in their life. They really, the first one would be uh, one particular question that I kind of asked myself was, if money wasn't a factor, what would you be doing right now? And that's like kind of my day to day or week to week thing. Um, so if I just money wasn't a thing. I didn't have to show up to work. What would you be rather be doing? And there's
Fishing.
some, yeah, like you have a set purpose that like, hey, you would really enjoy that. But then um, going beyond that, like, what would you bring to either the world? It doesn't have to be work or anything, but it's just like, hey, would you, build your own house? Would you go and try to build a business? Like, tons of different avenues that you can go with that. But when that question was first asked to me, it was really a struggle. When I first looked at it, I was like, man, like, you know, what do I want to do with my day if like nobody was telling me I had to be at work or anything like that. So that would be my first question. Second question would be, um, uh, if you lost it all, and I called, or what I've heard this as being called is, failure finding, I guess you could say. But if you were to lose it all, or everything were to fail, you lose your job, one income that you have, what would you do in order to get all that back? And when I went through that process, it wasn't so bad because it was just like, oh, if I just quit my job or I lost my job, it wouldn't be too difficult for me to either find a new one or be able to earn an income to cover at least my basic expenses. You tighten the belt a little bit, and then also have an emergency fund. So it's really not that fatal, right? So really lining that stuff up kind of makes you more at ease. That it's like, hey, if I jump off this cliff, there's a safety net at the bottom. So those are a couple questions that I think your listeners can really take and find a little bit more clarity in what they want to do.
Yep. Yeah, I think it goes back to being stuck in the hustle and bustle, because if you ask yourself those questions, you're aware of the answers to those questions. I think you're already prepared for the worst, quote unquote. Um, and I think if you already know or have a good idea of how bad it can really get, when you realize that it's not that bad, it ends up giving you some relief. So it's one of those things, like that saying, like prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, and I'm sorry. One more question.
I'll
I
go
think
for it.
that kind of rounds that all off.
Go for it.
Um, also, if you only had, instead of let's say 40-hour work week, if you only had 8 hours to accomplish what you do in 40, as far as your tasks that you have in that 40, like how would you accomplish that? Because you can only work 8, but you need to get a 40-hour work week in. How would you accomplish that in 8 hours? And that's kind of how I tackle certain tasks as well. So when I'm going through a week, I'm not just going through, these little tasks like one after the other, checking my email, all these little remedial stuff that doesn't push the needle forward. It's more of being judicious and just like totally just anything that doesn't matter. It just allows you to be a better judge of task management and time management. So that's also something that's allows people, since they feel like they don't have a lot of time from work, but if you only have like 2 hours a day, what were the things that are high impact that will allow you to get to the goal that you want to have?
Hmm. So you're saying if you had only 8 hour, how would you get in 40 hours of productivity if you only had 8 hours? Is what you're saying?
Exactly. Yep. How would you accomplish it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, well, there's definitely a lot of ways to go about it. And I'm not necessarily answering it for the listeners, so I'm just thinking about it out loud. But that's
Hmm.
interesting. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's also allows you to just be deliberate in the tasks that you have. It's not just mindlessly going through your day. It's like, hey, I have these tasks that I'm going to do, and that's what I'm going to accomplish.
yeah, I think the important thing is to not get yourself in a position of feeling that you're that horse with a carrot on a stick. I think
Exactly.
because once you're in there, it may seem hopeless. Like you know what? Actually, I just realized something. I haven't said this in a while, because I used to say this a lot after every, not necessarily every episode, but several episodes. But like for example, like the hardest the hardest prisons to get out of are the ones without bars. Um, and it's been something that haven't. I know if there's listeners out there that have been keeping up with all the episodes. First of all, I appreciate it. Um, I know I haven't been saying that for a long time, but it's the more I see it, the more I think about it, the more I see how true it is. Because when you look at when again, if you get yourself in a position thinking that you're that horse with the carrot on the stick, you feel trapped. But in reality, you're not trapped. Like you're not physically trapped. Like you could still have options. Uh, what those options are is unique to every person, and every person has their experiences and stuff like that. And but the thing is to get out of that mental prison, because once you're in that mental prison, your physical all the physical decisions around you are now locked. You
Yeah,
know?
it's law of limiting beliefs. So if you don't think that it's going to happen, then it won't. So biggest one for me, if there's someone that looks like you or comes from the same background as you, and they've accomplished it, then it can be done. And that's what I look at it. That's the litmus test for me. So that's the biggest thing that you know it's just obviously I'm not going to sprout wings and fly, but as far as limiting beliefs, yeah, there's a lot of people that think that certain things can't be done because of some BS reason that keeps them on the couch. Like really, that's what it is. It's just an excuse for them to say like, hey, no, that's not real, so I can feel better about myself and not think that I'm a failure. So
Here's and I'll probably and let's leave it on this note because we're close to time. But I always found it interesting how we can spend so much energy thinking negatively about ourselves. If we spend that much energy, like, why isn't it easy to spend that same amount of energy thinking positive of ourselves?
yeah,
Like finding one good quality that we see, okay, I have this good quality, and then just focusing on energy on that quality itself. Like, I always found that to be interesting. And, it goes back to just mental prisons. It's like the jail warden in a mental prison is yourself. Like, you gotta go from being the jail warden to basically being that person to opening up the key, the gate, the cell, and letting yourself out. I mean,
exactly. Sage advice from New Age alchemist right here.
yeah. I mean,
I love it.
it's one of those things we have to just kind of. It's hard to really get in that mindset, but yeah. So anyway,
Well, if
with
it
that
was
being
easy, everyone would do it, right? So, yeah, you just need to be the uncommon minority. You just need to. That's what you have to do. You have to get up, and that's why people or the minority of people are successful in something that you want to do because they have a different way of looking at life, and that's what you got to adopt.
yes, sir. Yeah, man. All right. With that being said, any final thoughts before we go off?
No, nothing on my side. I thoroughly enjoyed this talk. We talked about several different subjects, and I think they tied pretty well, actually, coming
Yeah.
back to the end. But yeah, enjoyed it, man.
Yeah, because even the final topic, which we were talking about, big changes and the word change in itself, I think that's still kind of we segued pretty seamlessly into that as well. And I think the conversation did flow pretty well, pretty well. Definitely a huge improvement from our first episode. That was I still look back at it and just laugh at myself. I was like, yeah, how terrible I was at it. And
Well,
how
I mean, yeah, you start somewhere and then you get better and better. So no, I've seen you grow, man, and it's great to see. I live vicariously through people that are trying to accomplish something, and I see it every day in what you're doing. But I vibe with that. That's what I like to cheer on.
yeah, dude. It's about continuing to get better. Like this podcast wouldn't have happened if because you're one of the major contributors. You're one of I think three people that helped me. You being the biggest push, that helped me push myself out of my comfort zone and actually be able to get in front of a camera. Well, obviously right now the camera is lacking, but and in other episodes, been in front of a camera and doing this already for about a year, and there's big changes that are going to be coming into the podcast itself. With the first being merch is coming up pretty soon. So yeah. Anyway, my final thought is just that don't be afraid of having conversations. Conversations are great ways of figuring out stuff about ourselves and figuring out stuff about our surroundings and where we could be and what new road we can take. It sometimes are scary to talk about, but I think they're conversations that need to be had, and especially in the most objective way possible. With the only bias being towards yourself and towards the betterment of yourself. So, yeah. All right, man. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, and because I know I have you on social media, but go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy. Just one handle, JCJ Street, on pretty much every platform. You can even find me on Clapper. So
Clapper? There's something called Clapper?
Yeah, it's probably like the old people version of TikTok.
No.
Oh yeah, yeah. So you can find me in almost anything at JCJ Street. So love to if you have any comments on things that I've said, love to talk about it. Looking forward to meeting you and having a conversation, continuing it.
I definitely recommend you guys that have Instagram and TikTok follow. Some funny stuff there too, for sure, and a little bit of different things, and you can see some of those awesome hiking hiking content that
Oh
Josh
yes,
is
if you're
posting.
interested in seeing a few of the sites that I saw, really it's just magnificent out there. But that is on my Instagram, also on my TikTok. So go and check it out.
Definitely worth checking out. All right, well, that's it for us for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Those are still watching and listening. I apologize again for the lack of video on my end, and I'm going to work on that. But yeah, looking forward to keep having these conversations, and make sure you stay on JCZ after I'm done recording. But
Yep.
all right, bye.